Are you driven, ambitious, and ready to earn? WESN, the content capital, is expanding, and we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 6861662 and start building your future.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios, but they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
In this day of stay-at-home and work from home, home has never meant more than it does today. Whether you're looking to buy, rent, or build your new home, now is the time to get going. Gittins & Gittins real estate agents are here to take you to that place of your dreams. Let us take you home. We'll help you find that rental to rest along the way, or journey with you to find your home destination. Investors and commercial enterprises too, call us and we'll walk the distance to place your business in just the right location. Owners, leave the headaches to us. We'll find your tenants or buyers while you stay at home. We'll even manage your property at your bidding. Anything real estate, come home to Gittins & Gittins Real Estate. Call us at 760-3280 or 747-1220 or visit us at 16 Fifth Street in Woodbrook.
WESN.
I'm John Michael Small, this is Talking Point, and I'm not sure if I'm up for more, well, I don't know if I should say bad news, because it's not necessarily things that are new. What do you do when you get the details of things that you know are technically bad, that you have low expectations for, but yet still, you're in a situation where you have to wonder, just how is it that these things are supposed to be allowed to function or not function the way that they are supposedly operating? Now, there's a couple of things, because it seems as though the dynamics in Tobago might start to change, and perceptions might start to change. The opposition is seemingly looking to push that, and one could argue, as much as I believe that in part the government is more than happy to distract us with controversies on the opposition. Not saying that they are not significant or there's nothing warranted, right? At the very least, similar to what Karen said about the Speaker of the House being the chairman of the committee, the precedent set. You have to be careful you don't set a bad precedent. It doesn't have to be about the individuals involved, because it wasn't necessarily the most egregious breach in the world, but it was severe in the implications of procedure, depending on what the investigation unfolds. And I do believe, though, however, that the government is not necessarily instigating drama, at least not fully, but they're more than happy to take advantage of drama. And perhaps now this is an opposition that is saying, well, we need to counteract drama with more drama. Unfortunately, on some level, that is human psychology if you don't necessarily try to engage in the democracy part of our political system with the full weight and responsibility that all citizens should have in order to ensure that you maintain a level of knowledge and awareness of the happenings of current events so that you are informed, but not informed by perusal, because that's why the bacchanal works, rather informed by some amount of engagement, significant self-research, determination, study, whatever. So first of all, there's the whole situation with the jet ski operators, where now some of the tour operators are saying that they did warn, or there were people that were warning about certain things not going right. And it fell on deaf ears. In fact, and I didn't necessarily think this was pertinent at the time, but when the incident happened with the young girl tragically losing her life, around that time, somebody I knew said, I just was on the phone with THA with a complaint over a similar occurrence. Now, in the similar occurrence, there was no loss of life, but it was the same issue about jet skis and watercraft operating around swimmers. And it seemed as though the impression he got at the time was, I'm not really getting any kind of feedback that suggests there's any kind of prioritization on this issue. It's almost as though, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. What? The boat came close, but you live, right? You didn't get hit? What are you worried about, Willis? Now, I didn't necessarily know how pertinent that was, because on some level, that's how government bureaucracy is, right? And that could have just been a staffer. That doesn't necessarily reflect the entire THA, the entire public service in Tobago, etc., except it seems as though other stakeholders have been warning about things. In one case, quote, when we realized jet skis on the reef, we would usher them out of the reef into an area they could ply their trade. There was a working system and it was stopped. I can't tell you why it was stopped. Everything just started to fall from there. Now, to what extent is it budgetary? Is it poor management? Is it politics? I don't necessarily know if there's enough to say there's smoke and therefore we should start to look for fire. But on some level, this is the political system that we have, right? I don't necessarily like the implications of it, but the opposition leader has come out to call out Chief Secretary Farley Augustine for quote-unquote mute leadership. Leadership appears to be more concerned with political accommodation than principal advocacy, a Tobago administration that is increasingly willing to compromise Tobago's patrimony, increasingly willing to align unquestionably with the UNC central government. Which is very interesting if you think back to the Chief Secretary's messaging, because at times, even if he said PNM, there was a lot about central government and Trinidad. And on some level, psychologically, you're gearing up your supporters to view not just PNM people as opposition to you, but Trinidad as opposition to you. And of course, now all of that rhetoric just went by the wayside, right? The opposition leader said, or warned, Tobagonians are noticing what is happening. Now, part of it is, and we don't know, this is one of those things where you're not going to know. The MPs from Tobago, of course, they sit on the government side. So, what is their true feelings on various issues and policies? We don't know. Because for certain issues, we're past the point of blaming the PNM. There will still be issues where you could blame the PNM, and you're like, well, look, this is the things that we inherited and was set up, and it's taken so long to kind of fix this and fix that. That's fine, that's normal. There will be. But government policy decisions, the effectiveness of it, or rather, maybe I shouldn't say the effectiveness of it, but the validity of the decisions isn't based on the PNM. If the situation is bad, that doesn't mean you somehow magically make bad policy decisions after it. You might have a bad result, and then you need to make decisions to treat with that result, but you are still standing on your own 2 feet with regards to your policy decisions. The practical result is affected by what you meet. If you see a mess, well then you clean it up or you don't clean it up, and we judge it on the merit of that. You being able to clean up the mess, how you are able to clean up the mess is not necessarily anything to do with the person that caused the mess. Now, if they left you without a broom or a mop, then you could say that. But again, we could still judge the policy decision of, well, why didn't you buy a broom or a mop if you needed it? And not get hung up on the fact of, oh, well, you don't have and you don't have. Because that actually, when you think about it, it sounds like an employee that's just looking for an excuse not to do the work. Well, you know, boss, you didn't get me anything I need, so I had to wait on you. Which, granted, if I'm working somewhere and I need to mop the floor, I'm not going to use my money to buy the business a mop. There are quite a few bosses that aren't going to pay me back. So, on that level, that's fine. But this is governance. This is a different ballgame. They sit occupying space saying nothing, mute on advocacy for Tobago, mute on the crime situation, plain and simply mute on invisibility. That must concern all of you. Now, here's the thing. The opposition leader is speaking about a questionable situation overall. One of the details she has not seemingly gone in, and let me just double check this, is with Tobago's water supply. Now, there were 2 issues with the water supply. The first was that during a peak period like Easter, the situation with the alleged sabotage or the alleged domestic terrorism or what have you, from what I understand, issues with the water supply were known to be happening well before anyone told the public about it. And it then leads to the question of, if enough warning was given in advance, then would so many villas and hotels, would they have still been caught seemingly unawares and at critical low water situations at peak levels of occupancy when they could ill afford to be nearly out of water? Because since no one told them there was an extraordinary crisis, no one seemingly started to ration in preparation to try to survive said extraordinary crisis, because they didn't know. It doesn't take much for you to run out of your water tanks. You might say, well, hotels are supposed to have big water tanks. Yeah, hotels are not occupied by only one family. But then what compounded the issue was apparently sometime between last dry season and this dry season, policies in WASA, I don't know about the rest of the country, but in Tobago changed. And the rates, well, before you didn't have to pay for a water truck. So I guess it was to some extent based on available supply and available trucks. But you didn't have to pay for it if you had significant water disruptions and you needed it, which may not be the best, very best way to do it, right? But it was on some level workable. Because you're paying for water, the water just ain't coming. Now, commercial water rates are metered, at least in Tobago. The problem is they decided to put a fee for truck-borne water for those that pay a commercial meter rate. And the rate for the truck-borne water is exponentially higher than the rate of the pipe-borne water, which in the long run is completely unsustainable given the fact that most weekends are not Easter. So you had situations where, and I know this for at least 2 hotels, the water required for as much as a week, but maybe as little as a weekend, cost the business somewhere along the lines of $10,000 or $8,000. Because the rate out of the metered rate from the water main is, I believe, something like $3 per cubic feet. But the rate for the truck-borne water is $150, no, $200, $525 per truckload. I think it was 100 and something per cubic feet, something like that. Don't quote me on that last rate, but it was $525 per truckload. Not necessarily the big trucks that used to operate before. And there were some hotels, I think after Easter, there was one hotel somewhere in North Tobago, $8,000 just to meet its water needs, either for that week or maybe as little for a weekend. Now, one of the questions is, why is your rate different? But then also, it was a situation where apparently in Easter, all of this seemingly came like a thief in the night to hit various businesses over the Easter weekend. They weren't aware of a crisis, and then they weren't necessarily aware of exactly how much money it would take if they had to rely on truck-borne water moving forward. Now here's the thing. I suspect, I could be wrong, I do believe the hoteliers are complaining. I don't know if they took their complaints to the THA. But at some point, I suspect if it was the PNM in central government, we would have heard something from the THA by now. One of the things that the opposition leader said was, yes, well, I don't know if she necessarily acknowledged the budget allocation, the $3.72 billion budget allocation, but the report says that the opposition leader has claimed that budget allocations for the THA have been fluctuating and reduced in some instances, which, to be honest, that sounds like things the PNM did with local government. So it's not as though this situation, there's no precedent for it to be possible. You allocate X, do you actually give out? Do you actually physically distribute the money to that allocation? Why is, in terms of accounting on some level, what is the big difference between the THA and a local government corporation? It'll be interesting if that is the final outcome. Will the Chief Secretary be able to tell us? Because, listen, the opposition leader might be blowing smoke here. Will the Chief Secretary at the end of the fiscal year tell us exactly how much money did Tobago actually receive, and not just speak about an allocation? Because we've seen this from the previous administration. Allocation does not actually mean that you actually get that money in hand, that the money was actually spent. All the while, the Minister of Works is saying bigger fines coming for water theft. But it seems almost as though WASA in Tobago at least has figured out a way to take advantage of the same businesses that technically would be necessary to help develop Tobago in terms of the private sector, and if not growing private sector jobs, at least maintaining private sector jobs. But also, how many industries does Tobago have? Does it have a manufacturing industry? Can you say retail generally is an industry? A lot of its food distribution and food retailers and wholesalers, they're going to be relying on the hotels. The restaurants are going to be relying on, some restaurants at least, customers from hotels, because the food and beverage culture, eating out culture in Tobago, it's not like what it is in Trinidad. It's a lot smaller, and they're just different cultural dynamics. And this is one of those things where, so at least in some quarters, the wonderful taxes for alcohol might actually not be providing an increase in revenue. Customs and excise duties, so that's both imports and local manufacturing, might not actually provide an increase in revenue, because at least in some retailers, certain hard liquor, the sales dropped. I know for my friend group, we're not, yes, we can drink, but we're not necessarily people who, oh, we must drink. We must buy this alcohol. Oh, it went up in price by $50 to $100, we're still going to buy it. Nah, we'll make do with whatever. So if people started buying less alcohol, all of a sudden the customs and excise and alcohol, it don't matter. You might actually see a reduction in revenue generated by those areas. But also, similar to now, I have to wonder, is the government not understanding the fact that if you pull the rug out from underneath small and micro enterprises, quite a lot of the lower economic ladder, those jobs, because small businesses, they're not going to have a lot of upward mobility, right? So it's a lot of entry-level jobs. But right now, it's not as though we have a private sector or a public sector with just an abundance of jobs and not enough people to work it. Far from the truth. The government wanted to claim that they'll get so many people, so they'll grow by so many jobs, and when it came time to do a hiring drive, far more people subscribed it than what was appointed. So, yes, you might want to clean up CPEP and URP, but it literally took months to then say, all right, and now we're going to look into the illegality. And we have yet to hear any follow-ups from that. It's almost like if they can't prove anything, which is kind of sad, because there probably is something there, and it shouldn't be that hard to prove, but But you know what? We just fired everybody to get rid of the corruption. We also took out money from the economy. Took out money from parts of the economy that would circulate it aggressively. And I wonder if similar things are happening because of certain taxes, certain fees increasing. And now you have a situation where the hotel industry in Tobago already had to deal with one public utility essentially fleecing them because the government was not necessarily operating with the correct sense of urgency and awareness. You close the beaches, you basically shut Tobago down, but you have hotels paying for electricity that they can't use. And instead of trying to figure out a way to renegotiate with the natural gas suppliers and the electricity suppliers, you just leave the status quo and say, well, the hotel's on the hook for it. Because obviously, in a global pandemic, all hotels that are not operating have billions of dollars so that paying out tens of thousands of dollars every month when no revenue's coming in is easy. And in case you're wondering, I was being completely sarcastic. There are very few, if any, rich hotels in Tobago. I think Cocoa Reef might have been one of the few ones where potentially the ownership, it would have been something that the owner could have gone into his own pocket to deal with. But most hotels, even the old big ones, it's not that easy. And now we have this water situation. Where instead of paying for services you're not getting, now you're seemingly overpaying because of an emergency on WASA's end. You're paying a higher rate because something went wrong with WASA. The day-to-day rate is not that. The metered rate from the main is not that. But somehow you have to pay a higher rate because something went wrong with WASA's equipment. Why do the businesses? Because it's not limited to hotels, potentially. I just know that tourism kind of made the situation apparent. So now I need to know exactly what water theft and water rackets are you going to go after, Minister? Or is this just another one of those things where, because Stephen A. Smith said it best. He was on Cam Newton's podcast recently, I believe. And he pointed to the fact that, look, the two political parties in the United States, neither of them are incentivized to do anything for African Americans because they automatically vote for one party. So one party takes it for granted that they'll get the vote, and the other party takes it for granted that they'll never get the vote. So neither side cares. I don't know if there's a situation where people are starting to think that the PNM just not going to get the votes, so we don't need to do as much. I think that would be a mistake. Tobago, as far as I'm aware, never voted PNM until it did. And then look how long that lasted. It wasn't a once in a blue moon situation. And maybe one of the things that this show has said is, hey, the people in Tobago, it's not quite like Trinidad. They don't play with their politics as much as Trinidadians play with their politics. It was a decisive message, but it wasn't necessarily a sudden one if you actually pay attention with regards to voting out the PNM in Tobago. It wasn't a sudden one, but it was decisive. There was no pussyfooting around. But I don't know why it seems as though when people win an election, and again, maybe for the THA it's not necessarily so, but that said, my complaints about WASA, I don't know to what extent the THA has control over that. That's why I mentioned the Minister of Public Utilities. So, ironically, I don't know if this is a situation where the central government is thinking, we have Tobago in our back pocket. No. And magically, it will never change. Because look how well we're treating them. And because we're treating them so well, we could do whatever we want. Or is somebody in Wesn and Tobago being allowed to do some kind of mischief? To run some kind of racket? I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see exactly who is going to speak about the water issue moving forward. But I guess nobody cares about the hotels in Tobago until they want to talk about, oh, but you know, tourism and blah, 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 blah. Here's the best kept secret about hotels in Tobago. It's a lot more work than you think it is. And it's a relatively thankless job. But what industry, in terms of scope, in terms of the sheer amount of people that are employed, how many industries does Tobago have to be the starting point to develop something? And look, at the end of the day, everybody gives lip service to tourism. You cannot grow your tourism industry by harming and shrinking the private sector. Because government-owned hotels, it has a very, very hard limit on what's practical. And that hard limit is once you start to own more than one hotel as the government, things get real wonky real fast because you're competing with yourself. It's not as though the people in, say, the Ministry of Tourism or even the Division of Tourism for the THA or the whatever the name of the tourism development company or companies are right now, it's not as though they have a brand strategy, a marketing strategy, and then they figure things out. This is the strategy for the country. This is then the subsequent strategy for the islands. And then with the strategy for each island, this is the market segments. And then within those market segments, we have, say, we have Hyatt and Hilton, two government assets. How do we differentiate those two government assets? Because right now, they're essentially competing for the same market. Poor design. All right, how? Maybe the market is big enough. Well, then we need to push for that market. Or in the case of Tobago, we have Magdalena and Manta Lodge. Could Manta Lodge be for a different segment? How do we differentiate it from Magdalena? I mean, growing the market share of tourists coming to the Caribbean seemingly is never an agenda for anybody. But at the very least, don't try to have redundant properties trying to compete for the same dwindling number of customers. And then want to know why is tourism failing? I guess it's not profitable. No, it's because the people in charge just aren't good enough. They don't know what they're doing, and it is what it is. That is literally the oversimplification, but to some extent the truth of the matter for the last 40 years. But tourism is a long-term thing. Not a lot of people understand. That's fine. Water is different. So I don't know if we're going to hear the THA maybe now start to say, hey, we are supposed to be representing the people of Tobago. Hey, we have 2 MPs that are supposed to be representing the people of Tobago. Because at the end of the day, people, this is the funny part, people counted out the Prime Minister. We did here on Talking Point. There was nothing to suggest to us that Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar 2.0 was ever going to be a thing. In part because the opposition UNC looked that bad, to be honest. But at the end of the day, never say never. You never know when an opposition party that does not impress all of a sudden figure something out for an election in order to put them over the top, above a party whose approval rating, whether polled or assumed, probably plummeted by the time that election was called. It doesn't have to be that stark. The margins don't have to be as wide as they were. If the people of Tobago decide, hey, maybe we need opposing representation, they might make that determination. Maybe the same representation thing ain't working. Too much hand-holding and kumbaya singing. and rug sweeping. But again, the WASF situation is more on central government. I don't know to what extent the THA controls WASF and Tobago. Maybe I'm wrong. I can't remember. But it's not necessarily in this case for Tobago's end of the equation about policy. It's about representation. And I feel as though, and this goes to a wider critique now, political allegiances seemingly is more important than representation. Now, to be fair, you go against your side, the voters will not support you. And that's why I said, one of the things I said yesterday, the environment of our politics does not care about the individual. Members, voting populations of different constituencies, they don't vote for the benefit of their constituency. They don't vote for the benefit of representation in their constituency. And then they complain, I never see my MP, I never see my MP, I never see my MP. You voted for the guy. Well, at least over half of your constituency voted for the person. Did you vote for them because you thought they were legitimately the best candidate, or did you vote for them because of the logo? And then why are you surprised that? So the thing is, the TPP, they are allied with the UNC. They are sitting on the government side. Now, to what extent is it that they're on the horse and they just can't get off? How do you get off? What, do you then tuck your tail between your legs and go sit on the opposition side all of a sudden? I mean, on some level, your supporters, I'm pretty sure they haven't necessarily looked to forgive the PLM yet. So, but what else might suffer between now and whenever this is figured out? And figuring out doesn't have to be that the TPP has to leave the UNC. Figuring out could be, hey, somebody on the government side of the equation figures out what's going on wrong with the accountability and the reasonableness or the lack thereof of certain policies, and why is this being allowed to go on? Because we have already seen signs where the economy has been harmed by government policy directly. The thing is, I never necessarily thought that the PNM did anything to directly harm the economy. Indirectly, you could probably make a lot of arguments about what certain acts of seeming negligence might have then caused eventually, or even relatively quickly. But there are not necessarily a lot of times that I can remember where I thought, oh, no. These policies directly harm. Usually what happens is the PNM would have a policy to try to defend, to try to maintain. Everyone knows that it's not going to work. Everybody knows that it will fail. But they're still going to try to do it anyway because they don't want people to have to figure out, to have to suffer through without. Right? They don't want to be the one to pull that away or to take anything away from the population. So they kept trying to maintain things, and in the long run, there was no real reasonable expectation that it would have worked. Hence, indirectly, the more time goes on, the more the situation starts to collapse under its own weight, under its own unsustainableness. Yeah, there will then be harm to the economy. But it wasn't a direct thing. For better or worse. Right? Pros and cons. But I'm pretty certain what the population wanted, whether they know it or not, is they didn't necessarily want to shake things up to the point where it might be doing more harm than good. Not everything has to be positive, but you kind of need to have a net positive. If it's a net negative, then what was the point? Now, of course, the government is not going to say that's a net negative. And I don't know if we know enough to determine if it's been a net positive or negative. I just know talking about what the PNM did in the mid-year budget review is not going to necessarily be pertinent to that most important issue, what is actually going on with the economy right now for the last year. The actual figures, the actual wins and losses, the actual profits and losses. So the opposition has now brought in counter-bacchanal. The sad part is it's not necessarily stuff that they're making up. And this is one of the issues. If you are happy with leadership based off of who could throw the most mud, because that's what it is. They don't debate issues on points, on practical points related to the topic at hand. They debate issues by mudslinging on whatever random thing they could come up with, as though it's a schoolyard argument, as though it's some sort of disc competition. I mean, somebody might as well just basically say, your mama's so fat in Parliament, because that's effectively what they're doing. It's framed to give you off an air of relevance, but it's just as irrelevant. But hey, a lot of us like the bacchanal, because we rather see our side winning than actually see the country progressing. Winning on a little schoolyard debate is more important for some voters than actually seeing the economy grow, the criminal justice system improved, crime in the long term sustainably be reduced, the job market to grow, revenue to grow, private sector profits to grow, so then taxes can also grow. Figure out a solution to NIS. Figure out how you're going to stop having to keep TNTech on a late payment cycle where you're always $1 billion behind every year. And how are we supposed to pay off our foreign debts? Well, we hope the fairy godmother, one of them, shows up, I guess. We like it so. One of the things that, I'll say this. There's a point that it's from an article from the beginning of the week. I'm switching gears hard here. It's with regards to renewable energy. Now, some stakeholders, they were talking about the fact that, look, renewable energy projects in the Caribbean it might not be happening fast enough according to them. The thing is, one, how much of the low prices are because of subsidies or grants? Two, what's the actual carbon footprint of installing these things? Newsflash, you might not actually be saving the planet as much as you think. And three, the costs of these things, to operate. I don't want to see our prices of electricity in the Caribbean quadruple, like what happened in Germany. Because you'll still need your natural gas generation. And if the situation with things like the reserve fee is any indicator, it's not going to be cheap to have natural gas plants on standby for when the wind stops blowing and the sun sets and your current generation dips. But since the sun set, everybody has their lights on. because it's 6, 7, 8 o'clock. We're not necessarily looking to be plunged in darkness just yet. On some level, climate advocacy has reduced because the politics behind it is starting to fail. Because the politics behind it was not always genuine. And because the technology was not always practical. And because economic reality showed that push come to shove, countries like Germany that took a hard stance on renewables to the point where it increased the cost of living in their country, push come to shove, they went right back to coal. The planet's not in as dire straits as we thought, I suppose. So now putting this amount of pressure on the Caribbean to go renewables when this person speaking was speaking about the financial difficulties of it. But the flip side is this. We're an oil and gas economy. Yeah, we could profit off of oil and gas while we have it, but at some point we won't. And then now, if we don't figure out this electricity generation issue, I don't know if we're prepared to deal with electricity rates like the rest of the Caribbean. We have enjoyed a certain standard of living because at least at one point in time, God was a Trinity. We take God's name in vain far too often here in TNT. So with all of the economic stuff I mentioned earlier, I assume there's going to be a temptation now to give out freeness when the cost of living goes up because of these high oil prices. Temptation to give out the freeness. And in some instances, it might be reasonable and even necessary. But one of the things that the person in this article is speaking about is using energy revenue from fossil fuels to invest in renewables. Now, I don't know if you have to do it as fast, but I do know that on some level, whether you do it with the opening wave of the energy revenue or the tail end, you do have to start investing in what comes next, however that may look. I don't know if we're going to be looking to do that because right now, everything is about the short term. And the government, there's talks about who might need a bailout, and Carl might need a bailout, and look, Hilton, they want to pull out because the renovations haven't been paid for. So the government might need to take over Hilton, the management team might go, they might need a bailout. Hey, the government is probably going to need a bailout. It's not that the PNM was doing the right thing. It's just that they were maintaining what was there. Change for the sake of change. Sometimes that is too much chaos and not necessarily practical. But, all right, I just wanted to get that last part off my chest. Let's take a break. When we come back, the conversation continues. Stay tuned.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry, "Uncle." They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
In Trinidad and Tobago, cervical cancer still remains a serious health problem, ranking the third most frequent cancer among women in this country.
So you may be happily at home not knowing you might have the early signs or the early stages of cervical cancer. So the first thing is that it can be completely without any symptoms or signs.
Are you driven, ambitious, and ready to earn? WESN, the content capital, is expanding, and we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 68-61662 and start building your future.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
In this day of stay at home and work from home, home has never meant more than it does today. Whether you're looking to buy, rent, or build your new home, now is the time to get going. Gittins & Gittins real estate agents are here to take you to that place of your dreams. Let us take you home. We help you find that rental to rest along the way or journey with you to find your home destination. Investors and commercial enterprises too, call us and we'll walk the distance to place your business in just the right location. Owners, leave the headaches to us. We'll find your tenants or buyers while you stay at home. We'll even manage your property at your bidding. Anything real estate, come home to Gittins & Gittins Real Estate. Call us at 760-3280 or 747-1220 or visit us at 16 Fifth Street in Woodbrook.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
And I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have 2. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the game.
no.
Let's go to the last part.
I'm back here and talk about the WSND Content Capital Show. Michael Small, looking at an article today on a new piece of legislation, which is interesting because I don't necessarily think it's all bad. I don't know if it's well-intentioned or bad intentions. I don't think it's all bad, but I also am not sure if enough work was put into it to really say it's across the board a good piece of legislation. And I am speaking with regards to a new Victims' Rights Bill 2026. The report says that government's Victims' Rights Bill, which protects victims in a variety of groundbreaking new ways, will call for a sea of change in the mindset of investigatory agencies like the TTPS and prosecuting agencies to ensure victims' rights are upheld. Now, some of the things, some of the implications or some of the narratives in the report that came from Minister Devish Maharaj, Minister of Justice, who is piloting this bill, it is a line of certain things we hear anecdotally, but we hear it often enough that we know that it's not limited to 1 or 2 cases. The problem is, I don't necessarily know if the macro analysis is always, or the when you go up in scale, if the analysis is proper. So let's go where I think the minister does look at a specific case and might have a point, right? We don't have the details of the case, so I can't say yes or no, but on the surface, it seems as though he has a very strong point here, because the report says he cited a case where a mother successfully sued the state after her daughter was repeatedly threatened, assaulted, and then subsequently murdered, despite multiple reports to the police and pleas for protection, right? The minister said the victim made 4 reports to police stations from 2013 to 2017, 3 applications to the domestic violence courts. The magistrate questioned her for seeking a protection order, and she was turned down. Now, we don't necessarily know why. And the way our politicians are, there might be a lot there with regards to the why that could explain the situation and provide a different narrative. But I'm not necessarily going to go there just yet, because it seems as though, at least on the surface, she was trying to engage with the system, and the system did not respond back. So the minister went on to say in a quote, or the paper quoted him, "This is a classic case of a victim who maybe if we had a Victims' Rights Act, the investigating authorities may have found it necessary to probe the matter more diligently, inform her of the matter's progress, and take steps to prosecute the offender. Just maybe a life might have been saved." And then he goes on, well, technically this came before, but I will now include it in my presentation. Quote, "Thousands of domestic violence incidents are reported annually, yet only a fraction result in charges or prosecutions. This gap between reporting and enforcement reflects not only evidential challenges, but systemic shortcomings in how victims are supported through the process." Now, there's one part of that sentence that I know to be quite true. Evidential challenges. Because we have had a member of the TTPS here who has been in that space, the Special Victims Unit. And he has warned that a lot of the times the issues are people go to the police, they want to report an incident, or they want the police to speak to whoever, but they don't actually want to formally charge the person. And when it comes time to say, well, do you want to charge him? When it comes time for the alleged perpetrator to potentially face any significant consequence, they don't want to do it. And then what's the police supposed to do after that? Well, the person who we believe you abused no longer wants to go on the record to say that you abused her. Literally, if you charge someone in that situation, the defense will trot out the alleged victim, who will then say, I am not a victim, and the case will collapse. So there's a part of me that wonders, because the Special Victims Unit, so I find this interesting that he used domestic violence cases, and maybe because the statistics makes it, how to say, enticing to use those statistics as examples for this. There probably would have been better crimes with better examples, because the Special Victims Unit, at least before, they were one of the few areas of the TTPS when all else was looking like some kind of amateur hour. They were putting in the work and getting results. And ironically, they were having to deal with the most delicate of situations. And when you listen to ASP Arun speak, he is speaking with not just this is how I am or this is what I try to do. He's speaking about an expectation that is there, that he has for all of the officers dealing with these types of crimes. An expectation where I did not see necessarily any reports to cause me to think that expectation is unreasonable. So now the question is, yes, in one case it might have been, and also this might have been before the Special Victims Unit existed. So to what extent is the example still pertinent, still significant, still relevant now in 2026? He's going 2013 to 2017. The police technically has changed. So with regards to these types of crimes, the new Special Victims Unit might have improved the situation, right? We know of situations where you make a report, the police don't want to say anything. You know, with regards to things like traffic accidents, with regards to things like violence amongst neighbors or other violent crimes, we know that this happens. To what extent does it happen, we don't know. But the example, at least singled out in the report, in the paper, was a domestic violence example. And like I said, the statistics might look enticing, but did he really speak to the officers on the ground to get more detailed information? Not to say that it would disprove his arguments, but it will make his argument more robust. And this is one of the issues that I have. When you read the report, it is mostly a set of hot air. It's mostly about we need to protect and we need to improve and we will make improvements, and there's no actual pertinent details specific to what will be done and how it will be done. Just a lot of promises, right? It's like, you know, when a deadbeat parent basically says, yes, you know, over the next vacation period, we'll go out a lot. I'll come and see you and we'll go out to the mall and we'll go out to the, but there's no actual specifics of, you know, all right, what dates you're going to come and see me, what the schedule's going to be like, you know, which mall we going to, you know, or what restaurant we going to, or what activity we're going to do. Maybe we go to the beach, you know, maybe we go to a water park, you know, maybe we go on a vacation, you take me somewhere, you're a parent too, we could go to Tobago for a couple of days. No, it's just, yeah, well, you know, we'll spend more time and things will be better, you'll see. I mean, that to some extent when it comes across, because it took me, I had to go like 6 paragraphs in to actually get anything that wasn't looking like a series of buzzwords strung together. Like, for far too long, victims of crime have experienced anything but justice. They've experienced silence, exclusion, and secondary victimization, delays, poor communication, and lack of cohesive support. Right, so then what you're supposed to do is explain what do you mean when you use the term secondary victimization. Go into details. And, you know, so then people will either figure out why it matters to them, or you can then further explain it. Why secondary victimization, as how you defined it, matters to them. And how it mattered to certain other people, and how it mattered in certain other cases. But there's a lot of just these surface level thoughts that are formal speech, that sound good, but when you really dig into it, it's lacking on details. Because his example, the one example he gave is 2013 to 2017, a case, right? That again, the example does not necessarily account for what has changed since then. But he's also looking at the crime statistics. Over 42,000 serious crimes were reported to the police between 2020 and 2023. Each name is a person whose life was shattered. Right. What does that have to do with the Victims' Rights Bill that you're presenting? Because you're using an emotional argument of, look how much these people have suffered at the hands of criminals. But we're not here to talk about something to do with dealing with criminals per se. This is a Victims' Rights Bill. So what does that have to do with it? No explanation. We have a caller, but I just want to get this point quick. There is a list of victims' rights provisions. It does not have any sort of hard figures or hard details. It says things like victims are protected from the moment a report is made, which I think might be one of the ones that I have an issue with. Because what does that mean? There's a good one. Property taken during investigations must be safeguarded and returned. That's fine. That is an area where people do have complaints. It varies, but generally speaking, there are complaints about that. But victims entitled to updates on investigation, that's also fine. But victims are protected from the moment a report is made. What happens if they pull up short on the report? What happens if they want to go back home with their abuser? Because they just want the police to kind of scare him. They still love him or her. Rarer, but. And on some level, let's put it this way, there were 42,000 serious crimes between 2020 and 2023. So that's 4 years. So that's 10,000 serious crimes. That's literally the entire police force. If you put one officer to one victim. What do you mean by protection? That there's a lot of practical limitations on the implementation of that. No details on that means that such a provision, mentioning it, is quite worthless. We'll take the call now. Arima on the line. Good morning. You're on the air.
So, Michael, small morning.
Morning.
Morning to you and the viewers. I want to disagree with you.
Go ahead.
On your points that you started off with.
What, recently or at the top of the show?
At the top of the show. Because the last government, even though when they did come in power, they only had money to run the country for 3 days. In the 10 years that they were in office, for me, they do two main things that had the country spinning on one spot. The first one is accepting the Salary Review Commission. Their statement on the raise of salaries, accepting that. Because when the Prime Minister's salary can move from 59 to 85, and you're not seeing no value for that for that raise, and then you have the whole public service, from daily rated workers to university professors, everybody, and you tell them I'll take 4%. That couldn't work. And the second one that bugged me, Tobago. Personally, Trinidad and Tobago is supposed to have between 3 to 4 passenger ferries and 2 cargo ferries. And the Prime Minister taking that money and what he used for the airport, $1 billion, which they finish here. He could have taken half and spent it on fixing the roads in Trinidad. And the next half he could have taken it and buy a cargo vessel for Tobago. But they keep spinning this country on one spot and not really tackling the issues. So what you find happening now is that our standard of living is worsening. And the persons who we put there, take for example, yesterday a gentleman was appointed head of the sport company. These appointees getting $50,000 and $60,000 as chairman of state boards. And they just doing overseeing work. It's just a show up, sign and leave, more or less. Because the organizations would have already had the plans that they're working towards. So it just changes the picture on the top of the door. These are the things that have to stop for Trinidad and Tobago to really progress. And the last thing I want to tell you, where Republic Bank is concerned, personally, I find the citizens supposed to take all the money out of this institution. Because who is the majority shareholder in the bank? The same government. So at all levels, when I check it, if you as a business sell a phone card for $20, you make $2. And then you have to pay the bank $1.30 for using the electronic payment system. It ain't making sense. It ain't. And it's time that we as citizens open our eyes and see what it is going on here. So as I tell you, good show as usual, but I don't agree with the start of the show. The former regime makes serious mistakes, and we're paying for that today. Have a good day.
Yeah, caller, I wouldn't say no. But now, I'll say this, I actually disagree myself. There was one instance where I think they did directly harm the economy. See, that's the thing. I said what they did didn't directly harm the economy. It indirectly harmed it. The one area that, however, that I should have remembered, but I never necessarily thought of it this way, was the refinery. Because in hindsight, it's really hard to justify that decision. It's really hard. The SRC stuff, that is not about the actual monetary value to the economy. That was about leadership. Because the country could have afforded it, technically speaking, right? Increasing that few salaries by that much was something that the Treasury could bear. It could. The question is not if it could. The question rather is if it should. And the answer to that is no, it should not, because it looks bad. But I was speaking about practical effects to the economy. The Prime Minister getting a higher salary is not what's going to bankrupt us, right? The Prime Minister taking a higher salary while not giving people similar pay raises, causing a lack of trust and confidence in the system and a disengagement with the population, that could harm the economy. That's indirect. The refinery, shutting it down, that was direct. The taxes that you see, and maybe now the Republic Bank thing, to what extent is that the bank trying to pass the buck on to the consumer? Technically, one could argue that it might be a direct thing. Or it could be a symptom of the economy is bad. And because the economy is bad, consumers and consumer activity is bad. And because consumer activity is bad, the bank maybe is overcompensating or compensating for a weaker revenue position. And we're going to be in a vicious cycle where both the government and, in some cases, private business is going to try to extract more on what dwindling economic activity remains, which will then further stifle what remains, shrink it further, which will cause them to be extracting more, which will further stifle it more until we stifle it to nothing, until we kill the baby in the crib. We have Faisabad on the line. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Morning.
John, so as I understand it, the bill that the minister is proposing,
yes,
it is not yet law. It has to go before Parliament. Is that correct?
Well, yes, he's piloting the bill. Yes, so I believe that is correct.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, is that correct? It has
yes,
to go
it's not. It's not yet law. In fact,
good. Exactly.
The amount of details is
so. When it reaches that stage, I think a lot of the matters would be fleshed out. Yes.
Well, you see, caller, here's the problem. Caller, here's the problem. We said the same thing about the budget, and that did not happen.
No. Stop. I am saying to you that
when it gets before Parliament,
you have concerns.
Yes.
But when you're raising your concerns, which I respect, you seem to know, I don't know exactly what is this, I don't know exactly what is that, So clearly, I mean, as a journalist, I think some research is supposed to be done.
Hold on. I am speaking to the style of the presentation lacking pertinent details. I can't research a bill that the minister is not presenting.
I am saying to you, a journalist have a responsibility. If you are to inform the public, I mean, you must come with some substance. What you are saying here to me this morning doesn't make any sense.
But caller, this is
because
funny.
you are not presenting...
The reason why it doesn't make any sense is because that is the point I am trying to make
No,
about
no,
what
no,
the
no, no,
minister
no,
is
no, no,
saying.
no. I am thinking that you have to use the media to enlighten people. I'm never, you know. And so that is the problem we have in
Caller,
the media.
if the minister does not have detailed information, I cannot make it up.
And
it
I
is
am
not my
saying
fault
to you,
that
a
it's not there.
journalist has a So why do you think the journalists, the ranking would have fallen in the last update? It's for things like this.
No, caller.
Journalists just come on.
That ranking literally has nothing to do with what you're saying.
It might seem to be that way.
Caller, that ranking.
Just now.
How does press freedom have to do with this? How does press freedom have to do with this?
Yeah, but when you come on the station and see that diet of crap that you just did.
No, wait, hold on, you made a point.
No,
so let's go to the specifics. How does press freedom have to do with what you just said?
Well, allow me to answer. We could.
Okay.
We could sing together. We can't talk together. Yes?
Okay, go ahead.
And so I am saying to you, is this type of a diet that you feed on the media that actually asks politicians not to engage with you because you all are not very, very fair and level-headed in all the commentaries.
Caller, that's not what
politicians will definitely.
That's not what the Press Freedom Index measures.
But no, because they are saying that politicians wouldn't engage. That's one of the major things. But it's because of the media practitioners and the way they behave. They pick political sides, they pick personality sides, and they carry on as normal. And that is a fact. Look at
whose side have I picked? Whose side did I pick?
I said the media, and I'm speaking about the ranking. I'm not talking specifically about any particular person. And so I am saying to you, look, we have the fronting with John Bates, Penelope Beckers as the leader of the opposition. We have the situation Baliram Mirage. We are not hearing about those things. Those things are being swept under the carpet. Is it conveniently? Those are things that are supposed to be on the front burner. We are talking about the opposition, that this piece of legislation has to go before Parliament still to be debated, fleshed out. But we have burning issues right on the front burner that we not. How convenient is that? Tell me. Look at the fiasco with Balaram Mirage and how long that has been languishing in thin air. Nobody sees. Well, the media fear to investigate the PNL, I wonder. Take care, my brother.
Thank you, caller. Now, what am I supposed to say about the Balaram incident? That's internal political nonsense. He's the mayor of Arima. If he wants to engage with the political party, that's central government. If the PNM wants to provide consequence for him, that's their business. I read the reports. I didn't necessarily think it was an important enough for me to bother with it. Will press freedom has nothing to do with that. And this is the point that you didn't want to acknowledge. They had a budget presentation. Everybody said, well, they didn't have enough details in the budget presentation by the minister. Understandably so, because we don't want to watch one presentation for like 8 hours. We'll get the details from the line ministers in the debates. What happened in the debate? Most, if not all, of the major ministers did not speak before they wound up the debate. So to assume that the details will come out in the debate, and then here's the thing, why are you presenting future legislation that is half-baked? What's the point? What's the value of taking up Parliament's time to do so, or taking up the media's time to speak about things before it's ready, before there's enough detail to fully understand it? The reason why I was speaking in that manner was because that's essentially, I am speaking about the presentation being made, but also I was, one, interrupted, so I couldn't finish. And two, I didn't say it was all bad. Again, I was interrupted and didn't finish. But I did say that the examples provided was bad. I went into details on the examples that were provided by the minister. I worked with what he gave me or what was reported. I didn't say the bill was bad, you know. There was one provision that I now started to mention about where it might be impractical. Anyway, I'll have to end that there. Well, not end that there, stick a pin there, because Claxton Bay is waiting. Caller, good morning, you're on the air. Caller, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Sean. Yeah. You know, we just do a lot of criticizing, Sean. But you know, if we really in the position, if you as a prime minister, right? You know, you will see things differently. Just like, okay, this government criticized so much about the last government. And today, what we seeing? What we seeing today, Sean, all the criticism that they criticized, this nearly they have to go back to the same thing where they was criticizing. So sometimes we criticize for criticizing's sake. We criticize because we don't like the government. And that is what licking up this country, you know. People don't like you, Sean, so they criticize you and they demonize you and they call you all kind of thing. But you know you're doing the right thing, but they don't like you. You understand? And this is the problem we have. We have to stop allowing people, you understand, who have their own belief. It's okay for you to believe, Sean, that when you die, you will turn a pencil and somebody could sharpen you till you come a rubber. That is your belief. I could have a belief too, but the truth, that is what we need, you know. The truth. Where is the truth? You understand? And this is the problem that the country having. None of these people in parliament can speak the truth because all of them have problems. They are before the court. And you know, that is bothering you, Sean. That is bothering you because you might like the party. You understand? But the other government will say they are held at a higher standard. So then, you're holding one at a higher standard, and the lesser, you're putting them in power to do all kind of madness. How that could... And you know what? You all believe that people out here, why all these things happening, only believe that people not seeing all these things? Only believe these people, these parliamentary people, these politicians believe that people not seeing what is going on, what they are doing. And then now you want the people in the society to behave good. You want the children to behave good. How that is possible, Sean? When you when you have a whole political party, which is like a lawless dump, all of them have problems, and you coming now to make law for me. You understand? You coming to make law for me. How that is possible? And we say nothing. We as the good people out here say nothing because you know why? That's my party. Let them do what they want and all this kind of stupidity. Sure, it's time we have to start speaking truth in this country and start making sense. And these people in government today, a lot of them, and that is not their fault, you know. That's the Prime Minister's fault. That is the leader. She's supposed to do better. That is her fault. Don't matter how much you try to cover her, hide her, put her in a hole. That is her problem. Because the last regime, the problem was Dr. Keith Rowley. Everything happened, national security. It a change, it come around on the other side. We have to deal with it, Sean. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. I don't know practically if it should be placed on the feet of the Prime Minister. That said, I did say this with regards to the head of the Municipal Police Service. So you get to that level on some level, the buck stops at you, you're gonna feel the brunt of it. I will say this, I don't think the caller was demonizing me, but I'm not entirely sure if the caller was even really understanding the argument he was making. He started off saying what I was doing this morning in the last piece of commentary that I was giving, or the last topic I was touching, was an example of why the press freedom rankings fell. Or he asked the question, and then he went on to talk about trying to say, no, he's speaking about the media in general. But you're speaking about the media in general as a follow-up to a point you're making about my commentary. And again, I was pointing the fact that the minister is trying to sell us a bill, and he's not presenting the bill. Let's use the caller's terminology. He's not presenting the bill, he's trying to sell us the bill. He's making us promises on the bill, he's not presenting us the bill. That's why I said, it's like when a wayward parent gives promises, but not details. What am I supposed to make of it at some point? What is it? How am I supposed to interpret that? Because it can come across as empty promises. There are some provisions which, again, are not detailed, but on the surface, they do speak to issues that do exist, which I did see before the caller. But there was one provision that I think it's a far more complex, and you can't just have a one line and then magically, no, we need to hear what it means, because it's completely worthless the way how it's presented, because it's far too complex to have just a simple concept to then implement. But I'll get into that. We have call on the line. Good morning, you're on the air. Dabadi.
Hi, Sean. Morning.
Morning.
Sean, first of all, I don't want you to think that the callers are blaming you. Right? The two previous callers, to me, made a lot of sense. But I want to ask you one question.
Go ahead.
Do you believe that a lot of times when there are serious issues out there, that smoke screens are put up and diversion tactics are made by governments? I mean, total government, whether it's opposition or those in power.
Well, I did say that today, that I think that both
All right,
of these
if you
things...
did say that today, then we are on the same
because
page.
I think...
Also...
Okay, go ahead, yeah. But, Colin, let me say this. One of the issues I have with that is the last administration, it's kind of crazy, because if that is true, they were using controversies, the smokescreen controversies, and it didn't make sense to me. But this situation, we're seeing opposition government go one after the other.
I am saying that you have sensitive viewers and listeners and followers of your program.
Mm-hmm.
Not only sensitive in the sense and knowledgeable. And I consider us to be loyal, not loyalists, but more patriotic citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And the mainstream media always try to cover up serious issues. I'll give you one example. The crime situation and the murder rate in this country is going way, way over and beyond. One of the media houses, the dailies, used to publish it on the front page every day as to what the murder rate is. You don't see that anymore. There are serious issues with the police that have not been answered, matters that the DPP has sent to the court. And it's over a year plus now that some of these matters are not being brought to the front. Sean, all we are asking the journalists for, and if you consider yourself a journalist, is investigative journalism. And I don't know if you do it, but whenever you are given an opinion, you should say it's your opinion. Because we are looking out here for facts, and we would like our journalists and them to come forward with facts and true investigative journalism. So therefore, we know that you're not really playing with our head. And when I say y'all, I mean mainstream media. A lot of us depend on information from the media. And most times we don't get that. Most times you don't get that. There are so many other burning issues that what some of the trivial things that go before Parliament, you know, and there's so many outstanding things that parliamentarians need to be taken care of. It's only in Trinidad you could have members sitting down in the House who have been charged for certain criminal offenses. And you will only find that in Trinidad and Tobago. I know you are innocent until proven guilty. However, I don't think that you should be sitting down making a law where you might have broken a law in the past. I know, and I will leave with that this morning, and I hope you have a bright and blessed day. But don't take it personal. I don't think that your callers and them are actually blaming you, but it's more mainstream media. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Well, it's just that he mentioned an issue directly with me. So I do feel the need to defend that. In part, so the General John Bates, Faris Sawari, opposition leader, Terence Dayal saying PAAC situation. We dealt with that yesterday. I gave my opinion on the matter yesterday. There isn't that much more for me to say. We're waiting on the opposition leader, right? There are certain things about the opposition leader's situation that I rather not say because, again, it might cause people to think that people who did not speak to me spoke to me, that information, somehow I have information that I don't have. This is an opinion show. This is an opinion show, and I'm willing to put opinions out there. Part of the reason is information is not forthcoming. Too many people are too afraid to speak out. They don't want to lose their job. The only people I'll speak out are union leaders or heads of associations, but not all of them are necessarily seeking the interests of all stakeholders or even all of the interests of their union members. So you take what you could get. And there's always been information gaps. That's in part of the reason of what I was getting to with regards to this Victims' Rights Bill. It seems as though he's trying to sell us a bill, but he doesn't necessarily either A, want to give us the details, or B, the details haven't been formulated enough yet. Now, I haven't necessarily speculated as to what that might imply, just that the presentation was pretty thin. Some of the provisions, while not detailed on the surface, speak to basic everyday issues people have with the TTPS. Some of them, like saying all victims get protection, are more complex and need more than a sentence. But I am not really speaking about the Mayor Farima's situation. The situation you brought up, and I'm happy you brought it up, Mr. Lee, because I made the case. The only opinion I gave on David Lee and the charges that he was facing was to say, counter to your opinion, innocent until proven guilty. What does it mean? Because he is an elected official. That means that the people technically selected him. While I understand very much the sentiment of, well, how do we let him be in Parliament when he has a charge over his head? The problem is, if he's innocent, would it have been right to remove him and deny not only his rights, potentially, but the rights of the people who voted for him? That's all I said on the David Lee matter. Because not everything do I need to weigh in. More importantly, not everything is there enough for me to weigh in on. But it happened. That's all I said. That's all of the opinion I had. If my opinions don't go far enough for callers, you could call in and either prompt me to go further, and if I have an opinion to go further, I will, or maybe give me something else to consider, or maybe call to disagree. The issue I have with the caller's disagreement of my opinion on the Victims' Rights Bill sales pitch is because I think it's an inaccurate take on what I was trying to say, and it was not necessarily fully analyzing where I was coming from, and it was potentially misrepresenting me. Also, the caller's opinion was not consistent with himself in the points he was making, because on one hand, you can't say behavior like this is why press freedom index fell, and on the other hand say, well, you're not talking about me. More importantly, press freedom index does not speak to this. That's not what is being mentioned with regards to press freedom index. And it is not likely that the two things have a direct correlation or causation with each other. We have San Fernando on the line. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Sean.
Good morning.
No, morning. Let me just say good morning to Mr. Dabadi. Dabadi, morning. Yes, Sean. So let me get down to two things. This victim rights bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or this, as you just described it, as a sales pitch. Now, this seems to be a style, and I'm not seeing that it necessarily bad by the government, in that they put a sales pitch out with a bill. Similarly with the stand your ground legislation. And then look for reaction from the public, from the population. And exactly what you are doing today with that is the reaction that is necessary. They put out a pitch there and you speak about it to get a feel, and then before the bill comes out, they may have to tweak or whatever it is. What is it is if they do it in that way, then any journalist has a right to do what exactly you're doing, to pick apart what they put out there. Once there is nothing physical for you to read and say this is, or they present a bill and you can say, okay, we have an issue with this, have an issue with that. You can criticize what they put out, and that is the reason they do it. That's what I'm getting at. That is the reason they do it, to get a feel for what the population thinking. So I see nothing wrong with what you did this morning. Now, the other thing is, a lot of people expect a lot from journalists. However, in Trinidad and Tobago, people have to understand what the term journalist means. You know, we have a lot of journalists who are reporters. In Trinidad and Tobago, I think we need more investigative journalists. That doesn't say the ones that are there aren't doing their job. You know, they're doing the job as reporters. They get in information and then disseminating the information. That is what it is. We need more investigative journalists in the country. We need more people to go into and dissect a lot more analysts. What you are doing here is analytical journalism. You analyze a lot of this, try to analyze a lot of this stuff, which we need more of as well. We need more investigative journalists and analytical journalists. And thank God in the morning, you are trying to be an analytical journalist. So you have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, Caller. I'll say this. I don't view myself as a journalist, right? I have respect for that profession. I don't view myself as a journalist. People who do what I do, oftentimes they come with a journalistic background, but not always, right? The new technology is changing that. I don't know if I fully agree with you. I would hope they would have had a stronger starting point. I don't have a problem listening to feedback, but this whole throw it out there and see what the public makes of it and see where the complaints come and then start to formulate, because it seems as though they're only going to formulate it after the complaints come in. And there's a part of me that's like, why do it that way? One of the things that wasn't mentioned, and maybe he did look into it, but I have nothing to suggest that he did. Yes, you might not necessarily think going to the police will give you the best, most accurate view of everything, but the Police Complaints Authority would have been a really good starting point. But then you also have to go to the police now, you know, figure out what officer is on crap and what officer is genuine, and try to get some of the more realities on the ground to then help you formulate this thing. Because the sales pitch, it didn't even really speak to generalities. It was so generalized. 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 It was so and so non-specific to the point where it literally was a lot of what was reported, if that's what the minister was the main body of what he was saying or presenting, it looked as though it was something that he didn't really put a lot of research in. Or at least the executive summary went on way too long. Way too long. And it was almost like if his presentation was more executive summary than body. So it was unbalanced to the point where academically it looked a little amateurish, not a lot, because he did have, the thing is, there is pertinent points that he's making. It's just so thin or so devoid of justification with regards to a fully fleshed out paper or a fully fleshed out presentation. We have St. James on the line. Caller, good morning. You on here? Santa Cruz, sorry. Woo, misheard that. Santa Cruz, good morning.
Morning, Sean.
Morning, morning.
There is a dangerous situation up going to Maracas on the hill to the right-hand side. I see a lot of people cutting down about 12 or more trees on that hill to the right-hand side. You see, when this rain starts, those trees, some of them is heavy hardwood trees. They're going to come skating down those mountains to the Maracas Road with people going on the beach with a family. Whoever is in authority and they're listening to this station this morning, get your workers up there and do an investigation. Do it now before the rain starts. Every year the rain going to be more heavier in this country here. Right? Another thing, Sean, there is a little wickedness going on in the fishing village with a businesswoman on the hill with some land business. They have thrown down a lot of trees in a man's garden up there, damaging produce that now was flowers in to produce fruits for this year. Right? He went to the authorities to see what angle he could take. But these are the type of things when you see things happen and police have to get involved. These are the wickedness that people will be doing. They're greedy. And greediness doesn't put you nowhere. Now, that same person had hired a tractor some years ago and removed the government inverts from that old road, causing a blockade underneath the car park by the Silver Bridge and the drain from the roundabout. So there's another headache again. I understand is the counselor from Mr. Charles up there supposed to be seeing about those things. By now we should have gotten the message because I was on it before election, but I don't know what happened after that, you know. So I hope whoever in authority listening to this get cracking. And another thing, Mr. Gopi Singh, get those people in the back of Mount Hope Hospital who's supposed to be walking about the hospital and seeing about the louvers and the cracked tiles where people have to be pushing sick people down in little cracked tiles where they could fix, get them to do their work. They're not working. The maintenance in Mount Hope are not working. Get them to do their job. The nurses fed up complain. None of the louvers working. Why? Because they're not maintaining the thing. Right? All right, brother, you stay safe and have a nice weekend.
Thank you, caller. That worker thing, that's a long-term problem. I mean, let me not say that. In this situation, I don't know if somebody wants to say it only started when Dr. Gopi Singh was there, but I suspect that's not the case. A lot of these things, it's a long-term problem, partly societal-wide. So that will take a lot of effort. That said, you can ask why is the effort not being done. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. This is one of those weird things where hiring, firing, job security, public sector institutions, blah, blah, blah. It's a mess. That's why you have so much contract workers, but the Prime Minister said we're going to get rid of contract workers because it's unfair. These people are on contract. Except the problem is, I believe I have spoken about this before. There are pros and cons to having permanent government workers and contract 3-year or however many months government workers, right? There are pros and cons to both. We haven't figured out the happy medium on how to do it. Here's the thing, with the stuff, with the neighbor situation, before we get to what the laws don't account for, sometimes there are situations where the laws don't account for. I don't know if, let me just do a quick scan, just based on the provisions. I'm not sure if these provisions for this victims' rights bill will speak to a situation like that, right? It said bill aims to reduce secondary victimization. That's a very generalization. How, right? I'll get to that in a bit. But this could be an area that even if you have legislation in place, right now, similar to the workers that you were pointing out at that medical complex, if you don't have strong oversight and accountability for the entire police force, something will slip through the cracks and you will get bad apples doing bad things. Because in part, they got away with it for so long, it's not that serious, it's not that big of a deal, and we are not a culture of spreading that around. It'll spread around, but not enough people will care about it because it's not bothering them, so they don't care, don't want to be involved because they don't want to piss off some random police officer they don't know. Now, with regards to the Maracas Road situation, one of the things is if it's a local government responsibility, one of the reasons why, and some of the other things that you pointed out, because of the election, there was a period from the time the election happened till the new budget where a lot of things were put on pause, right? Now, in theory, you had the budget that was presented by Colm Imbert the September, October before. But for whatever reason, things were put on pause, which didn't seem like a bad thing at the time, and I can't necessarily say it was a bad thing now because the government was, at that moment in time, trying to figure out what was going on. That's understandable. You're a month in, you can't, start giving out money however willy-nilly. Now, were they able to follow up potentially with allocations from the previous budget? Did they? I don't know, right? But it seemed as though a lot of budget things and expenditures and people that had contracts to be renewed and people that had job contracts to be renewed, not just service contracts. A lot of things were put on hold and they were waiting on the budget. And then, of course, now the budget, local government, I suspect, is not a priority for either the PNM or the UNC. Right? There are a lot of things that is financially, it requires a lot. So, should someone go and check it out? They probably should have someone checking it all the time. But if we take the Tobago example, for instance, there was one of the people saying, I was doing the job of monitoring the situation with regards to jet skis and where they were operating and how close they were operating to bathers and in what areas they were operating. And then it was discontinued. Right? At some point, I don't know if somebody gets into the head of a politician, that's not necessary, or they only humbugging us, or they only causing us to make losses, or some crocodile tears, Nancy story, or if they just figured we don't need to spend this money, we need the money to spend it somewhere else. That could happen too. I hope what you said does not come to pass, understandably. I don't want the road to have a landslide, and worse yet, if someone is driving in that spot at that moment, that would be horrible. I hope it doesn't happen. Someone should check. Will anybody check? Even if they hear this, I don't know. Now, one of the things that I wanted to mention was with regards to investigative journalism. If you used to read the papers, and I don't know, maybe it changed, but I used to part of a previous job I did was literally reading papers. And there were times when you would have multiple stories on the same page by the same reporter. Or if you, in the first 6, 7, 8, 9 pages, one reporter will have 3, 4, 5 stories, and a reporter will have 3, 4, 5 stories, right? And that's daily. Investigative journalism is expensive, depending on the types of stories you want to delve into, right? The reporter has to spend more time on that one specific story, researching the story, tracking down leads, driving all over wherever the information takes them, right? Now, I don't know if we have stories so big that you need to go and spend 2 weeks on one story. Maybe, maybe not. But I don't know if the business models allow for it enough, because they have to do that story while doing other stories, right? But then at one point now, also is the fact that because we're so small, it's harder to get sources. Yes, there have been anonymous sources for certain things, but not always. So if you don't have sources, if you don't have an in, if you don't have a way, your intentions to investigate all you want, however noble it may be, comes to naught if you literally do not have an avenue to get information. And a lot of times, a lot of the information, look, right now, the government right now apparently cannot get information with regards to who made what decisions to take Brent Thomas from Barbados and bring him back by force to Trinidad. Whether he voluntarily came or not, it is technically by force, because one could say he was willing in the moment, but it's not as though, oh yes, it's fine, I'll just come back to Trinidad, woo, happy days. No, there was no sunshine and rainbows when they're coming back. He was essentially forced. He just decided, instead of being dragged back to Trinidad, all right, I'll come back with you to Trinidad, but you had to go get him. And it was essentially government did it, right? Yes, the previous administration, but they work as the government, within the confines of the government. One would think if there was anyone that you should be able to get information on, it is what the past government did. But even the current government, apparently, is having a hard time getting that information. So there's some disconnect here with, I understand, I mean, there's a reason why public figures do not really speak about issues. They speak as little as they can. They appear as little as they can. Unless you want to show off, present yourself, sell yourself, right? As one member of the opposition did very recently. I'm not going to get into it. So I understand. I too wish we had more investigative journalism. We at times do. We at times do. They at times are in like the Sunday papers, long articles on some sort of technical issue that has enough information to make a reasonable argument. But we really don't do a good job. First of all, a lot of what's holding back investigative journalism is literally just the availability of data that is supposed to be available, like information you would get with regards to the Central Statistical Office, historical data, crime statistics, right? When there was 1 year when it seemed like murder was going off the rails and all of a sudden TPS crime statistics, it was usually late, but it was updated regularly. It was only a couple months behind, and then all of a sudden for 1 year, it might have been 2024 or 25. I just couldn't, I would look at the site and it wasn't updated from since January. It might have been last year, which I found strange because I'm like, isn't the murder rate dropping? I can't check. At least I stopped checking monthly once I realized the updates were non-existent. It could have been 2024. It could have been even before when the murder rates one of those higher years. So the information not being forthcoming is an issue for investigative journalism. And then there's the financial aspect. And then there's also any potential editorial interference due to corporate interests. I'm not going to necessarily speculate on what those are, but I'm saying that not to say, oh, look, these greedy, evil corporations. No, I'm saying business requirements or business factors, monetary factors, unfortunately, is more pertinent now than before. And you can't fault a paper for being concerned about its finances. You just can't. Why? Because we've seen 2 news outlets close. Our news landscape is worse off because of it, not better. Now, case in point, when I was reading papers as part of a job, so it was every day, I knew what the amount of news stories was on crime daily. And there was a point in time early on in the PNM's tenure, right? So we're talking like year 1 or year 2 or so, where there were a lot of stories and articles and columns on crime daily. There was just a lot. And then one year, it dropped by approximately a third. Less news stories, less opinion pieces, less editorials. It dropped by approximately a third. The murder rate didn't go down. And seemingly there was no business interest to say some corporate holding company was like, you need to stop. You need to stop because our politicians are looking bad and we need to stop. No, because all the papers, they can't all have the same corporate interest. They all kind of pulled up eventually on crime reporting. And I feel it's because, and this is the thing, we want to attribute editorial decisions to either being fearless or corrupt. Whether it is because, or biased against or for politicians. But never for mundane things, or at least what might be mundane in comparison. Because I believe what happened was at some point the daily newspaper said, we can't keep putting so much crime stories in the papers. Think about it, there were 600 murders. Were all 600 in the papers? Did all 600 get the same weight? No, but there was a point in time where it seemed as though a lot of murder stories were getting individual stories being written about them, you know, a lot more emphasis on the murder rate, daily, on the front page, etc., etc. And then at least in that time period, which I think was around 2017, 2018, or maybe 2016, somewhere around there, right? In that time, 2015, 2016, somewhere around there. I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact year. But I made note of the change from one year to the next, and I think it literally was because the newspapers realized the reading consumer was not being engaged as much and was not responding as well to all of these crime stories, murder, 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 murder. So I suspect the editors just made a decision, all right, we need to cut back on that. We did that for like a year or two. Now there's some level of fatigue where people are not responding to these stories the same way. And it might be cutting into our distribution numbers or advertising figures or what have you. Right? And so not all business decisions is some evil corporate overlord saying, yeah, 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 I have an agenda. No, some of it is literally, what are the sales figures? Do we need to adjust? This is why when you look at, you might have someone on YouTube that you might have liked at one point or the other, but when you look at, because this happens to me, there are people whose opinions I respect on various topics internationally. When I look at the headline or the titles of their videos, it looks like clickbait nonsense. And it annoys me. But I have to appreciate the fact that, A, their business team probably thinks we need to do it this way to ensure we get clicks. We need the clicks, we need the views in order to get the advertising revenue to pay the bills. Am I going to put an angry comment to say you should be doing this, it's unethical? If it might be the difference between his financial survival or not, and with regards to the internet, you could go from being very successful to very unsuccessful extremely fast. So who am I to judge? I'm not in that space. So judging the media is not that simple, which I guess is where we should end. It isn't. I understand. I get it. It's very easy to say this reporter is biased. Here's the trick. I have been, throughout every year of Talking Point's existence, I have been called biased for somebody or the other. Never for only one party consistently. I have been called biased multiple times every year. Sometimes in 1 week, I would be accused of being biased for both the UNC and for the PNM in the same week. Usually not in the same show, but within the same week. And if the public could potentially see things so differently that the public will disagree with itself who I am allegedly biased for, maybe, especially since I've been accused of being biased for both sides, maybe that might mean I'm not biased at all. Because like I said, I didn't necessarily want to continue any conversation solo about the situation with Senator John Bates, and I don't care about the Mayor of Arima situation. I just don't. Similar to how I did not prognosticate on any length of time with regards to MP David Lee, Minister David Lee's situation when he was a member of the opposition with charges over his head. It looked bad. Innocent until proven guilty. Now in this case, Senator John Bates, she admitted to some fault on her own and has tendered her resignation. We have spoken about it yesterday. If you missed it, well, you could check it up on our Facebook page and our YouTube page. It should be there. You could catch it there. I wanted to move on because, and I'll close with this, the Victims' Rights Bill. The problem is if you wait on the feedback of the public, that is not necessarily going to give you the best result. What it will give you is the result of whoever spoke out the most and the consensus of the opinions of the willing speakers, not necessarily the consensus of the population. Now, sometimes, yes, you will get enough of the population and they will have enough information to exercise good judgment, to provide a good consensus of opinion that would be pertinent, relevant, significant, effective. That's not guaranteed. It is not guaranteed that the public will know enough, will understand enough, and will have the right perspective to say, our feedback is going to make this bill perfecto. One of the things that I always say is leaders need to manage the expectations of the people following them. Political figures need to manage the expectations of the people who voted for them, or elected officials for the country. Whether they voted for you or not, you are the leader, which I have also said repeatedly before. The reason why you have to manage those expectations is at times the population can have unreasonable expectations. So the feedback from the population is not always the best. Now, granted, you will get a wide variety of perspectives. You could pick and choose. You could analyze them. But if we wanted to do this exercise, I, again, would have much preferred if the minister came with his initial pitch being a lot better, because it's not, I can't remember what the other debate was. But they tried to speed run at least the Senate portion of the ZOSO legislation. And with regards to the budget, we did not actually get a proper explanation of the budget from the ministers in the debate. So we had a budget presentation, and we got the documentation of the budget presentation at the time, at least. But information as to the details of the individual projects of each ministry, the intention behind it, the plans behind it, we didn't get any of that. We didn't get any breakdowns. We ironically got more detailed information from the PNM. And that's saying something, because it's not as though they were great communicators themselves. So I'm not taking it for granted that the debate in Parliament is going to reveal much of anything, if anything. I'm just not. Part of it is, yes, it's unfair. The UNC is in part paying for the deficiencies of the past administration that has lowered expectations with regards to things like communication, transparency, and the like. Benefit of the doubt, at least for me, is not something that I'm willing to just give out willy-nilly. There's still certain things, yes, I'm willing to give the government the benefit of the doubt that there was a threat against the government for a state of emergency. It's just that there's still a threat against the government. So one state of emergency that was extended wasn't enough. And at what point now, with 9 months of state of emergency, is it effective at stopping a threat against the government? That there's no updates on this? The PNM already lost. I don't need to deal with the PNM. I don't need to deal with the PNM. Right? Right now, the situation in the Senate, that is with regards to ensuring that you don't set a bad precedent moving forward. But that, right now, is not going to change the price of bread. And unfortunately, at some point, we have to acknowledge the fact that most of the population care about the price of bread, more than whatever bacchanal the Senate. Because most of the population look at Parliament and basically, they have issues with it. Let's just put it that way. All right, I think I have responded. Oh, we have a comment. Let's just get it quick. Let me see. Caribbean country should have its own shipbuilding yard. Now, I did see something on the internet that said that, look, shipbuilding has now been concentrated in a few locations, depending on the size. So with regards to cargo shipping, so part of the question is to build what size boat for what purpose, right? It's not that simple. We could have had it, we should have it, but now to try and do it now is not going to be that easy, especially since we just don't have the capital to start up a new project. All problems start when citizens cannot meet the basic cost of living expenses. Yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing. And in fact, that's one of the things. Even yesterday, a commenter redirected the end of the conversation to those wider economic issues from the Senate, what was going on in the Senate. Now, the last point there, the whole thing with Republic Bank, it brings that comment up to a new light. Each government should have a banking facility to truly serve the masses. Well, when you say each government, shouldn't it just be the government? Because if you say each government, the only thing I could assume is you're speaking about when office is changed or when terms roll over. This will set standards for other financial institutions. Maybe, maybe not. To what extent will people not trust the government bank? To what extent might a government bank be mismanaged? Right? We already have issues with people not trusting the banks or not liking the fees. So that there is a negative with regards to what Republic Bank did. But the problem is, and look, one of the things with regards to the same committee that was trying to deal with the pharmacy import licenses situation is that the committee brought to light deficiencies in the opinion of the members, or at least the chairman of the committee, the Speaker of the House. The FTC Commission, the Fair Trade Commission, I believe. We have bodies like that in name in Trinidad and Tobago. Do they do anything in practice? And do we really have people in these institutions, sometimes, yes, not always, that are proactive, that are true to a sense of duty and responsibility to the people of Trinidad and Tobago and to the nation of Trinidad and Tobago? Do we have that? I don't know. Because if you want to deal with this banking thing, the regulatory side of it needs to be better. But oftentimes, that and all is going to be victim of politics, right? I mean, just look in the last couple of years with regards to the Auditor General, two administrations, the central bank governor, blah, 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 blah. Whatever can be made a mess has at times been made a mess, particularly when it's about money, particularly when it's about national level money, right? Because every government wants to move money around. They don't necessarily want to be accountable for it. But I'll end that there. We're over time. So thanks to the callers. Thanks to the commenter. Yeah, you know what? Sometimes new things will come out, and even if it's a comment on a similar point. The dynamics will change as new information or new events occur. I appreciate the disagreement because, and this is the thing, don't anyone think that I don't want to hear disagreement and don't appreciate it. Even if I vehemently disagree with it, by the way. And here's why. It allows me to address an opinion that obviously I don't have, but someone in the public has, and if one person in the public has it, then others might have it. And it gives me the opportunity to speak to that. Whether or not I speak to it effectively or not, I speak to it the manner how I choose to speak to it. That, in part, is what my commentary on the show is. That's what Karen's opinions are. That's what anybody else who speaks on the show. To do this kind of thing is to give your own opinion. That's it. You have to live by it. You have to stand by it. If you're wrong, right? If you're proven objectively is different than subjectively. Being wrong, it is what it is. And you're not going to please everybody. But that doesn't mean that I don't like or I dislike disagreement, because that is engagement. That is having pertinent conversations on pertinent topics. And that does allow the conversation to at least advance in a direction. So thank you, caller. The second caller, I believe. Faizabad. Have a good day. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Stay safe. We all should try to be better informed. Probably, I guess I'll speak more about this Victims' Rights Bill in the future, but until then, we'll see you tomorrow for more topics. Bye-bye.
WESN